Hello and welcome to our latest breaking news. Here are the detailed headlines. Please stay tuned.
The Iranian military showcased drones in a city square. The FAS news agency released a video showing the Iranian army displaying Shahed 136 drones in a square in the city of Tabriz. According to the open-source weapons portal, the Shahed drone, also known as a suicide UAV, is a vehicle designed by Iran, capable of flying to a predetermined target and exploding upon impact. This UAV weighs about 200 kilograms, carrying a fragmentation warhead estimated to weigh between 30 and 50 kilograms, enough to attack fortified targets as well as the most modern armored vehicles. The Shahed 136 can fly at a speed of 150 kilometers per hour for many hours, capable of operating over a range of up to 2,000 kilometers. According to FAS, parallel to this equipment display, pro-government marches continue nightly in Tehran and many other Iranian cities since the conflict with the US and Israel broke out. Last week, an object believed to be a ballistic missile also appeared in a similar parade. In a related development, commenting on Iran's military capabilities, Alexei Pushkov, chairman of the Information Policy Committee of the Russian Federation Council, said Tehran possesses tens of thousands of drones and missiles. He stated that Iran has made thorough preparations over a long period. They have moved most of their missile facilities underground, to places that are extremely difficult to access, and dispersed them throughout the country. They appear to have tens of thousands of drones and missiles, and they have been working on this for a long time, preparing economically. Pushkov assessed that the current conflict is existential for Iran, so the country will resolutely pursue it to the end. Meanwhile, he argued that for the US, this is a war of choice, not one of necessity. Putin affirmed that Russia will do its utmost for peace in the Middle East. Russian President Vladimir Putin declared that his country will do everything possible to meet the interests of Middle Eastern nations in order to contribute to bringing peace to the region as soon as possible. The Russian leader made this statement during a meeting with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who was visiting Russia. Putin specified that he had received a message from Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, while expressing hope that the Iranian people will overcome the current challenging period and soon return to living in peace. He also emphasized that Russia will continue to develop its strategic relationship with Iran. For his part, Foreign Minister Araghchi stressed that the strategic partnership between Iran and Russia will continue to be strengthened, and thanked President Putin and Russia for their support of Iran. The first LNG carrier transits the Strait of Hormuz. According to ship tracking data from marine traffic, the vessel Mubaraz, which loaded cargo from Abu Dhabi National Oil Company's Das Island facility in the UAE around early March, is currently passing the southern tip of India. Data shows this oil tanker had anchored in the Gulf but stopped transmitting signals in late March before reappearing off eastern India in late April. The global energy market is intensely focused on shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, which has dropped to nearly zero over the past 2 months due to rival blockades imposed by Iran and the US. Closing this waterway, which transports about 1/5 of global LNG supply, has caused market scarcity and driven prices up sharply. Ships turning off their transponders when passing through the Strait of Hormuz is a common tactic to avoid detection, and vessel data can also be spoofed or subject to delayed updates. The Mubaraz is currently signaling its destination as a terminal in China. In early April, tracking data also showed another empty LNG carrier leaving the Strait of Hormuz. However, no LNG carrier has been confirmed to have transited the strait so far. Some Qatari LNG carriers approached the Strait of Hormuz but were forced to turn back due to escalating tensions between the US and Iran. Iranian fighter pierces air defense, surprises US base with attack. Unprecedented facts about the early days of the US-Israeli war on Iran are gradually being revealed, including an almost unbelievable airstrike. NBC News reported, citing a revelation, that in the early stages of the conflict, an Iranian F-5 fighter jet successfully infiltrated and bombed a U.S. military base at Camp Buehring in Kuwait, withdrawing safely. NBC News last weekend quoted U.S. defense officials as saying this was the first time a U.S. military facility had been attacked by an enemy manned fixed-wing aircraft in many years. It is unclear how the Iranian F-5 fighter managed to evade the multi-layered U.S. air defense network deployed to protect Camp Buehring, which included the long-range Patriot missile system. Aviationist editor Stefano D'Urso suggested that the incident seems to have occurred under very special conditions. The Iranian pilot may have taken advantage of a moment when the U.S. air defense network was overwhelmed by missile and drone strikes in the early days of the conflict. 3 U.S. officials, 2 congressional aides, and a source familiar with the on-ground situation also revealed that U.S. bases and equipment deployed in the Middle East suffered far heavier damage than has been publicly acknowledged. The officials added that the Pentagon has not yet disclosed the specific extent of the damage to the U.S. Congress. A Pentagon spokesperson said, "We do not discuss battle damage assessments to maintain operational security. U.S. forces remain fully ready to fight and continue to perform their missions with the same level of effectiveness as before." The lightweight F-5 fighter was developed by Northrop Grumman and entered U.S. Air Force service in 1964, with over 2,600 units produced between 1959 and 1987. Durso assessed that while the F-5 would struggle to survive in a modern combat environment, it could still pose difficulties for enemy air defenses. The attack on Camp Buring occurred around the same time as other events, such as 2 Iranian Su-24 bombers being shot down by Qatar near Al-Udeid and Ras Laffan airbases, and an incident where a friendly fighter shot down 3 U.S. F-15Es. President Donald Trump affirmed that Iran can reach out to find a peaceful solution. Speaking on Fox News, U.S. President Donald Trump stated that if Iran wants dialogue, they can come directly or call the U.S. The U.S. president emphasized that Washington has secure communication lines and that the Iranian side understands the conditions for reaching an agreement. According to Trump, the core requirement is very simple: Iran must not be allowed to possess nuclear weapons. He argued that if Iran does not accept this, there is no reason for the two sides to meet. This statement came a day after Trump canceled a planned trip to Islamabad for Special Envoys Steve Witkoff and J. Nur, diminishing hopes for reviving peace efforts. Nevertheless, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi continues to travel between intermediary countries, including Pakistan, to promote dialogue channels and exchange Tehran's stance. Iran has long demanded that the U.S. recognize its right to enrich uranium. Tehran insists its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes only, while the U.S. and Western powers argue the activity could be used to develop nuclear weapons. Although a ceasefire has currently paused large-scale fighting, the two sides have not yet reached a formal agreement on terms to end the war. The 2-month-long conflict is believed to have killed thousands, driven up global oil prices, increased inflationary pressures, and cast a shadow over global economic growth prospects. Iran's internal turmoil: a hawk who once criticized Trump moves closer to the nuclear negotiation seat. Prospects for peace between the U.S. and Iran have unexpectedly taken a different turn following President Trump's decision to cancel talks. Observers described the move as a sign of a shifting wind in Washington's approach. Efforts to resume peace negotiations with Iran stalled after President Trump canceled the expected trip of senior envoys. Iran also declared it would not enter the negotiation table as long as it faces threats. Signs of instability continue to appear within Iran's negotiating team, as hardliner Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf seems likely to be replaced by a veteran conservative known for refusing to compromise on the nuclear issue. Iran International reported that 60-year-old Saeed Jalali, who currently leads what is described as a shadow government, is expected to succeed Ghalibaf after the latter suddenly resigned amid internal disputes. According to reports, Jalali also heads Iran's hardline extremist faction known as the Steadfast Front of the Islamic Revolution, recognized as a bastion of extreme conservatism in Iran. Ali Safavi, an official with the Iranian opposition coalition, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI, told Fox News Digital that Jalali has transformed from a nuclear negotiator into an influential figure in the regime. According to sources, Ghalibaf was forced to resign after attempting to bring the nuclear issue into negotiations with Washington, a move that caused a fierce backlash in Iranian political circles. The enmity between Jalali and Ghalibaf is said to span more than a decade and intensified during the 2024 election when Jalali refused to concede, contributing to President Masoud Pezeshkian's victory. Safavi stated that the clearer manifestation of latent division stems from recurring nationwide uprisings, deep economic crises, and war pressure. All of this is increasing internal contradictions. He added that rather than signaling a transformation, these developments reflect growing erosion and mounting pressure, deepening the rifts and making the regime weaker and more vulnerable. According to sources, Foreign Minister Araghchi is also trying to continue playing a leadership role in negotiations, highlighting competing centers of influence regarding Iran's diplomatic strategy. However, Jalali's likely appointment signals a tougher Iranian stance, emphasizing resistance over compromise. Safavi warned that factions ultimately share the common goal of preserving power. They differ on methods, not objectives. He wrote on X that, yes, the infrastructure is on the verge of collapse, the infrastructure of American-style domination and order, and then a better foundation will be built. A day earlier, he posted, "Silence is not the appropriate answer to Trump's nonsense. Let him say more, nothing is more effective in exposing the true nature of America than Trump's outbursts." Iran makes surprise proposal via Pakistan, bypassing nuclear issue to end conflict with U.S. Axios, citing informed sources and U.S. officials, reported that a new proposal from Iran has been delivered to the U.S. through Pakistani mediators. Accordingly, this proposal focuses on prioritizing the resolution of the Strait of Hormuz crisis and the U.S. blockade. Additionally, the ceasefire would be extended for a long period, or the parties would agree to end the conflict permanently. Finally, nuclear talks would only begin later, after the strait is opened and the blockade is lifted. The White House has received this proposal, but it is unclear if the U.S. is willing to consider it. According to observers, amid stalled negotiations, Iran's proposal would allow bypassing the nuclear issue to reach a faster agreement. However, lifting the blockade and ending the conflict would remove President Trump's leverage in negotiations aimed at eliminating Iran's enriched uranium stockpile and preventing future uranium enrichment. Meanwhile, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, chairman of the Iranian parliament and head of the country's negotiation team for ceasefire talks with the U.S. in Islamabad, reacted sharply to the Trump administration's claim that Washington holds an overwhelming advantage in the confrontation. Ghalibaf presented a detailed energy calculation that he argued shows the two sides are relatively equal, while warning this balance is about to tilt further against the U.S. as summer demand approaches. Ghalibaf wrote on X, "They brag about their cards. Just wait and see." In a short but sharp post, Ghalibaf described the conflict as a balanced energy card game, where supply factors lie on one side and demand factors on the other. President Trump once claimed Iran had agreed to everything, a statement quickly publicly refuted by Iranian officials. The White House has repeatedly described President Trump's approach as a long game. Ghalibaf's post directly challenges this view by presenting the confrontation as a balanced card game rather than a one-sided negotiation. The Iranian parliament chairman signals that Tehran believes time, demand cycles, and unused energy tools give it endurance that Washington has not fully calculated. Middle East conflict escalates, Iran deploys underground weapons, unexpectedly strikes back at US and Israel. One of the key targets of the US-Israeli military campaign in Iran was the destruction of Tehran's ballistic missile program. Despite thousands of continuous, precise airstrikes, Iran is believed to still hold the majority of its ballistic missile arsenal and may maintain the capacity to replenish the numbers that were destroyed or used. Recently, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) released videos showing vast underground bunkers deep beneath the earth containing missiles, drones, launchers, and complete weapons production facilities. The newly released videos show numerous underground weapons depots deep within the earth, helping Iran effectively evade and retaliate, surprising the US and Israel. Thanks to these labyrinthine secrets deep underground, Tehran preserved most of its forces before the intense US-Israeli coalition airstrikes, only to later launch a crushing counterattack. The IRGC stated that the underground missile cities lie beneath extremely hard granite rock, featuring large roads capable of handling heavy trucks, including launchers for ballistic missiles dozens of meters long, moving easily. Additionally, these underground bases also serve as launch sites for Iranian missiles and drones. They often appear suddenly, fire simultaneously, and then quickly disappear, causing significant difficulties for the US-Israeli coalition in detecting and destroying them. Furthermore, the Islamic Republic's weapons production capacity is maintained steadily to replenish weapons lost or damaged in combat. Thanks to dozens of such complexes, the IRGC is confident it can maintain its operational tempo for a long time. Experts assess that if Tehran retaliates intensively, its weapon stockpiles could last at least 1 month. If fighting on a smaller, attritional scale, 6 months would not be a major issue. Of course, although these labyrinths are not completely secret, they remain vulnerable to coalition attacks aimed at sealing tunnel entrances. However, Tehran's forces could quickly clear debris to get launchers operational again. In fact, satellite imagery shows that after the ceasefire on date, original said April 8, and its subsequent extension by President Trump, Iran has excavated underground weapons depots and resumed operations. Iran declares red lines as U.S. forces increase pressure near the region. Fars news agency, close to the IRGC, reported that during a recent visit via Pakistan, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi conveyed Tehran's red lines to the U.S. According to Fars, these red lines were sent to the U.S. in the form of a written message concerning some of Iran's red lines regarding the nuclear program and the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian media detailed that reliable sources emphasized Araghchi is acting entirely within the framework of identified red lines and the diplomatic mission of the foreign ministry. According to Fars, the messages delivered are not related to negotiations and are considered an Iranian initiative to clarify the regional situation. Iran's message was delivered as the U.S. dispatched a third aircraft carrier, the USS George H.W. Bush, to the Middle East last week. U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, recently confirmed that over 200 U.S. aircraft and helicopters, along with 15,000 sailors and Marines, have arrived in the Middle East with the carrier strike groups of the USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72, USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, and George H.W. Bush, CVN-77. This is the first time in decades that 3 U.S. carriers have operated together in the Middle East. According to some sources, Washington may be developing plans for new attacks on multiple Iranian targets in the Strait of Hormuz if the current ceasefire agreement collapses. The Trump administration has considered Iran's progress towards building a nuclear weapon a red line. Therefore, one of the U.S. goals is to eliminate Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium. Regarding the Strait of Hormuz, Iran partially blockaded the strait after the U.S. and Israel coordinated airstrikes starting in late February. Iranian officials assert that reopening the Strait of Hormuz will be impossible as long as the U.S. and Israel continue to seriously violate the ceasefire agreement, including the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports. In a phone call with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian stated that current U.S. actions are eroding trust and making the path to dialogue more complicated. He added that the process will remain difficult unless military actions and combat pressure from Washington cease. The Iranian leader also demanded that Washington remove obstacles, including the blockade of ships entering and leaving Iranian ports, to facilitate the resolution of disagreements. Meanwhile, a new report reveals that Iran has retaliated against the U.S. military much more strongly and with greater destructiveness than officials during President Trump's tenure ever disclosed. What the Trump administration tried to conceal since the war's beginning, according to NBC News, is that Iran attacked over 100 targets at 11 U.S. military bases in Gulf countries using missiles and drones. Notably, this included an F-5 fighter that penetrated air defenses and hit a base, a rare event in many years. Sources indicate the damage at these bases was very serious and far worse than publicly acknowledged. Simultaneously, this marks the first time in years an enemy manned aircraft has attacked a U.S. military base. Previously, President Trump claimed the U.S. held all the advantages in the conflict, while the U.S. Defense Secretary asserted Iran hardly had any military capability left to retaliate. However, the new revelations cast significant doubt on these statements. According to the report, Iran used a combination of missiles, drones, and even fighter jets to attack numerous U.S. military facilities in the Middle East, causing significant damage to depots, command centers, hangars, radar systems, and satellite communication infrastructure. Some Republican congressmen are said to have expressed indignation that the actual damage was far greater than the information they were provided. Sources also state that repairing the attacked bases could cost up to billions of U.S. dollars, as many modern military systems and strategic infrastructure were destroyed or severely damaged. These revelations come as President Trump canceled plans to send envoys to negotiate an end to the conflict and resolve the Strait of Hormuz blockade, indicating the military situation remains highly unstable. Overall, the report has heightened concerns that the actual extent of U.S. damage in the confrontation with Iran could be significantly larger than officially announced, simultaneously raising questions about Washington's transparency and strategy in this conflict.